Welcome to Commander Pop Culture, a place to gather magical information with some laughs, might I add. Hello everyone, welcome to Murders at Karlov Manor spoilers. This will be episode 5 and 6 combined. Took yesterday off, so I'll lead off with today's spoilers and I'll talk about Mondays after. So if there's any overlap and you don't want to stick around, I understand. But if you do stick around to the end, maybe you'll hear some thoughts that you didn't think of. I hope you enjoy. So let's get started. Krenko's Buzz Crusher.
But you are an epic buzzkill.
Well, I was almost excited because it says for each player you destroy non-basic land, so including yourself. You could break parity with this thing by only playing basics, but I highly recommend you don't do that. Even in mono-color decks, they still play non-basic lands for utility purposes, and that's like the best places to be playing utility lands. It's because you only need one color for the deck to function. Flotsam and Jetsam. The blue-green side doesn't really matter too much, but the Jetsam, the blue-black side's pretty good. For 6 mana, each opponent mills 3. Then you get to cast a spell from each opponent's graveyard without paying its mana cost. That's pretty darn good. It doesn't have to be among the cards that you mill. It could be whatever's in the graveyard at the time counts. And you get to do that for everybody. So it's like a little more cracked out version than the black primordial and the blue one, because you get to play whatever card you want to. I think that's why this card sticks out as much as it does. Insidious Roots. Creature tokens you control have tapped to add 1 mana of any color, and then whenever one or more creature cards leave your graveyard, create a 0/1 plant token and put a +1/+1 counter on each plant. For 2 mana, add an uncommon. That's pretty darn good. I'm gonna put this in my Izoni deck as well, because I exile cards from my graveyard with the attack and ETB trigger. And I just want to make as many tokens as I can get. And then if I can make my tokens also mana dorks, even better. And you could size up your plants that you make with this as well. This card is pretty darn strong for 2 mana. Even if you weren't playing as Oni, if you're just doing graveyard shenanigans, I would have your eye on this. Snarling Gorehound. Menace 1/1 for 1. Whenever another creature power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, surveil 1. I like that it could trigger off your token creatures, and I love how efficiently costed it is. Want to fill your graveyard up real fast? You're running a lot of rinky-dink creatures, or you're making a lot of tokens. A deck I used to play was Nethroi, and I played tons of creatures power 2 or less, and the reason why is because Nethroi reanimates things to 10 power, so you want to reanimate as many bodies as you can with the mutate trigger. I would appreciate Snarling Gorehound. Officious Interrogation for a blue and a white, and then for each target beyond the first, you pay another blue and white. Choose any number of target players, investigate X times, where X is the total number of creatures those players control. It's like a strive mechanic for players. That's kind of unique. You're going to be investing a lot of mana just to make clues. If you're a clue deck, I think you'll love this because you'll make a ton of them.
I got such a raging clue that I almost shot clue goo.
Ambitious Falcon for double blue and 1 colorless. You get a blue artifact creature. It has flying. Whenever it attacks, you get to gain control of target permanent that you own but don't control. So keep that in mind because it has to do with its disguise ability. When it is turned face up, target opponent gains control of any number of target permanents you own, and then you draw that number of cards. You're playing things like Zedru and you just want to give awful permanents to people. This will help you skip a lot of activations with Zedru. It can be kind of clunky in terms of tempo. Hero of the 10th District. It's a 2 mana drop white creature for 1 colorless, 1 white. Collect evidence 2. It becomes a 4/4 with vigilance. For 2 and a white, collect evidence 4. It's a detective and becomes a legendary creature named Chief Inspector Aliva. Base power and toughness 5/5, and other creature control have indestructible. You have to do the 1 colorless, 1 white first before you can do the 2 colorless, 1 white, so you can get the sweet body that protects your creature board. Double red enchantment. Whenever a creature is dealt damage, its controller may exile that many cards off the top of their library until the end of their next turn. They may play those cards. I love impulse effects. The only thing that's kind of dangerous is this affects everybody. So if you deal damage to someone else's creatures or your opponents deal damage to each other's creatures, you're helping them out. I don't really like this card so much. I don't like doing my opponents any favors. And that could be a lot of card advantage if there are big enough creatures in play or a wide enough board in play. Yaris, Roar of the Gods. Gruul and 2 colorless. Whenever one or more face-down creatures you control deal damage to a player, you get to draw a card. Whenever a face-down creature you control dies, return to the battlefield face-down under its owner's control if it's a permanent card, then turn it face up. Ooh, so you get the Segue, Disguise, and Morph costs should they die. You could run this as your commander and do a Morph Disguise deck. I would just run Sack Outlets. Basically cheat big stuff into play by only paying the cost to put something face down. That, and it also has card advantage should the face down creature deal damage. Pretty good Morph mechanic commander. Incinerator of the Guilty. Flying Trample, 6/6 for 6. Whenever Incinerator of the Guilty deals combat damage to a player, you may collect evidence 6. When you do, Incinerator does X damage to each creature and each planeswalker that player controls. That's not a bad deal. You just need a lot of permanents in your graveyard and it's a one-sided board wipe, I suppose. It's not a bad dragon. I wish it had haste. Now you're just telegraphing what's going to be coming, and it gives your opponents an opportunity to interact with you. And it's already fair because the damage is based on what's in your graveyard and how much you can exile. So that means once you exile a bunch of stuff, you have reduced things to exile for the next attack trigger. So maybe putting haste on this is a little more warranted. I suspect this might be a bulk mythic. Cryptic Coat. When it enters the battlefield, cloak the top card of your library, then attach this to it. Equipped creature gets +1 and can't be blocked. And then for 2 mana, you can return Cryptic Coat to its owner's hand. For 1 full revolution, it's 5 mana. 3 to play, 2 to activate. If you're using it as a form of card advantage, it's not a very efficient one. I'd rather play something else. Outrageous Robbery. Double black and X. Target opponent exiles the top X of their library face down. You may look and play those cards for as long as they remain exiled. If you cast a spell this way, you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color. What's nice about this card is it's not an until end of turn effect. It's kind of like the Shadows card from Lord of the Rings, only it's a big X spell. You'll always have access to those cards. So that's pretty nice. And it's an instant, so you could play it on the last person's turn and have access to all those cards. This is pretty sweet. I like this card advantage spell. Doorkeeper Thrall. Flash flying, artifacts and creatures entering the battlefield don't cause abilities to trigger. Ooh, the power creep. I love it. I like that I could get 2 of the most obnoxious ETB triggers on one thing. If you play Torpor Orb or any of the other creatures that deny ETB triggers, they're typically only just for creatures, unless you're talking Elvish Norn from March of the Machine. That affects all permanents. I like a good cheap body. I like Hate Bearers that could cast a wider net. Honestly, Hate Bearers are probably one of the more fair creature types in the game. Like, I know a lot of people don't like them, but they're just band-aids, so they're begging to be ripped off. Now that you're casting a bigger net, you're just going to end up pissing off more people. The likelihood of you keeping this for a long time isn't so good. Cut down now. Like, I don't need to run Torpor Orb or something else, because it's essentially combining them into one permanent. Power creep and Hate Bearers, I think, is perfectly okay. They're kind of
necessary evil
in the game of Magic. Lampblade Phoenix, 3 for 3/3 flying. When it dies, you get to exile it and collect evidence 4. If you do, return it back to the battlefield tapped. That's a classic Phoenix for you. Fortunately, it doesn't give it haste, and it comes in tapped, so you can't even block with it. At least there's no mana cost associated with it. It just cares if you're able to make evidence 4. The reason why they include the clause of it exiling itself is so you can't use it towards its own evidence ability. The designers of this card were pretty wise and savvy. If they didn't have it in there, people would just assume you could do that and would do it because it'd be within the rules. But since they did, this card's a little worse, but still a recurable body, and I'm sure Red Aggro would like this card in 60 card formats. Leyline of the Guild Pack. Like all Leylines, if you have it in your opening hand, you get to put it into play for free as a pre-game action. You have to mention that before anyone even makes a land drop. But what does it do? Each non-land permanent control is all colors. Lands control every basic land type in addition to their types. There aren't a lot of things that change land types or give your lands all types. There's only Dryad of the Lycian Grove and Prismatic. What's even more significant is it says basic land type, so this would work with Cabal Stronghold versus if you're using, say, Urborg and Cabal Stronghold, it wouldn't work because your lands are swamps, but they're not basic swamps. But this gets around that in a unique way. In other ways, you could be a little cheesy. Valakut, this will turn all your lands into mountains, all your lands into forests. You can play all the big dumb creatures that care about forests. High Tide. And you could just tap for the colors and then add blue into it. Get big explosive mana from this. The other significant part about this is actually its middle ability. Each non-land permanent control are all colors. I don't know if there is anything out there that does this. That's quite awesome. The Dominator United Commander Karth, I think it's his name. This works with Domain as well. Conspiracy Unraveler. 7 mana for a 6/6 of flying. You may collect Evidence 10 rather than pay the cost of a spell. Evidence 10 is a pretty tall order, and the CMC on this is pretty bad. I don't think this will see a whole lot of play either. I think this is a bulk mythic. It's just too steep. Like, even when things are in your graveyard, you tend to value them being there because you have access to your graveyard pretty consistently, and this turns off those strategies pretty handily, and I don't know if you'd want to do that to yourself. Case of the Uneaten Feast. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under control, gain 1 life. Solve if you gain 5 or more life this turn. And then once it's solved, you could sack this case. Creature cards in your graveyard gain. You may cast cards from your graveyard until end of turn. Ooh, that's kind of nice. It's like Underworld Breach only for creatures, only it's conditional and better in different ways. With Underworld Breach, you have to exile 3 cards for the escape costs. This, it doesn't care about exiling anything, but Underworld Breach can affect all the things in your graveyard. This only affects creatures. I almost like this just for the gain 1 life kind of clause. I love decks that your goal is to gain as many instances of life rather than big swaths of it. And just because you solve the case doesn't mean you have to sacrifice it. Honestly, I'd
say that for later.
Until you absolutely need to crack it. If you just got board wiped and you have all your creatures go to your graveyard, that's when I would use this. Forensic Gadgeteer. When we cast an artifact, investigate. Activate abilities of artifacts control costs 1 less to activate. So makes your clues that you make with this 1 less. Activated abilities of artifacts can't be less than 1. They have to include that because you could break a lot of magic cards if it didn't say that. I've seen a lot of like mumblings about Urza, because Urza can tap your artifacts for a blue mana, and this just churns out a lot of clue tokens. I'd also play this in the red-blue dragon from Strixhaven. Kind of does the same thing, only gives artifacts the ability to tap for mana, and Urza tap ability is on itself. That's how they differ, but I like the dragon a little bit more because you have access to an additional color. Urgent Necropsy. As an additional cost to cast spell, collect evidence X, where X is the total mana value of permanents this spell targets. Destroy up to 1 artifact, 1 creature, up to 1 enchantment, up to 1 target planeswalker. It's like a Golgari version of Decimate. It has some plus sides, it has some bad sides. Its plus side is, it says up to. The problem with Decimate is if any of the 4 permanents like get sacrificed or blown up, the spell will fizzle. Unlike this, because it says up to, if someone blows up one of the things you're targeting, the spell still goes through. The downside of this card is you could probably rack up a lot of evidence based on 4 permanents. So that's the crappy part about this card. It just feels a little too conditional. Yeah, I think this card won't see a whole lot of play. Deadly Cover-Up. Additional cost to cast this, you may collect evidence 6. You destroy all creatures. If evidence was collected, exile a card from an opponent's graveyard, then search its owner's library hand in graveyard with cards with the same name. Player shuffles, draws a card for each card exiled from their hand this way. It's like a surgical extraction, only it's a board wipe. Why do they have to make the evidence numbers so big? I feel like the best cards are going to have 4 or less evidence collections, because like anything bigger than that, it feels a little too situational. At its very weakest, it's at least a 5 mana board wipe. It's like in mono black, they don't have a whole lot of good mono black board wipes that are consistent. Like you can play Mutilate and you can play Dead of Winter, but that's conditional. The best board wipes in black are Toxic Deluge and Damnation. And then after that, they get far and fewer in between. Like your next best options are the one with Ugin and Nikobolas fighting each other to the death, and then this one actually, because it also has 5 mana. I guess its floor is not too bad. Lost in the Maze. Flash enchantment for 2 and X. Enters battlefield, tap X creatures, put stun counters on each of them, and then it says tap creatures you control have hexproof. I like that it rewards you for playing aggressively. You get to attack or tap your stuff, and then opponents can't target your stuff. Or you can do more shenanigans and tap your stuff down in response. Like Mind Over Matter, you tap your creature down, and then, oh, has hexproof, sorry, your spell fizzles.
You didn't say the magic word.
But I imagine people will rarely dump anything into X. They'll probably just play this for the double blue and X being 0. Just for the tap creatures have X-proof. Also has flash. Ezram, Agency Chief. Double blue, double white, and colorless. Enters, investigate twice. Sack an artifact. It gains your choice of vigilance, lifelink, hexproof until end of turn. It's a more complicated cast Baneslayer Angel, and it's not as good as Baneslayer Angel. It may be a 5/5 of flying, but you need to sack an artifact and invest 1 mana to give it another desirable ability. It protects itself with hexproof. You can be aggressive with lifelink. It has some applications, and at least it puts into clue tokens itself. Baneslayer didn't protect itself except from other dragons and demons. Cryptex. Collect evidence 3, add 1 mana of any color, put a unlock counter on this, sack Cryptex, surveil 3, then draw 3. Activate only if you have 5 or more unlock counters on it. You need 5 counters. You need to have invested 15 mana of CMC at the very minimum. If you, I think in most cases you're going to be exiling things that are bigger and only getting 1 counter. You know what I mean? You'll have to exile probably a 4-drop, a 5-drop, or something along the lines. Or maybe you'll have to sacrifice 2 drops, and then you're shrinking your graveyard pile with every subsequent activation. Just a surveil 3, a draw 3. I don't know if it's really worth it. I'd rather just play any other mana rock. It's just you sometimes can use it. If I have something with an activated ability, I want to use it now and I want to use it unconditionally. Why play Cryptex? Hunted Bone Brute. 3 mana for a 6/2 with Menace. When it enters, give target opponent 2 1/1 dog creatures. When it dies, each opponent loses 3 life. Ravnica has a suite of creatures that all have word hunted in them, and they all do this. You get a big creature, and then you give everyone else a bunch of little rinky-dink things that could block and kill your own dude. If you want people to have high creature counts for some sort of punishing play, like, I don't know, Massacre Worm, that's when this stuff gets kind of humorous. Case of the Crimson Pulse. When it enters, discard a card, draw 2. To solve, you must have no cards in hand, and then once solved, at the beginning of your upkeep, discard your hand, draw 2 cards. Wow. You'll see 3 cards a turn. That's pretty dope. Any kind of deck that's running red, having no cards in hand happens quite often. I love this card. I kind of want to put it in all my decks. There's a dragon that does this in a pseudo kind of fashion, and an enchantment. I'd be curious what other people think about this, if they like it or not. Undergrowth Recon. At the beginning of your upkeep, return target land card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. It's like Raminep Excavator, but it's also not. This has like a hard ceiling on it. You can't just play multiple lands from your graveyard. If you had, say, a Zeus in play and this, it wouldn't matter. Getting a land back every upkeep's not a bad deal. I'll play this in my land strategies for sure. I don't know what it's gonna sell it because it's fair. Treacherous Greed. As an additional cost to cast this, sack a creature that dealt damage this turn. In exchange, you draw 3. Each opponent loses 3, you gain 3. This is an instant, so you could cast this on your blockers. Your creature just has to deal damage for the clause to be met. I like the mana investment. 3 mana for 3 cards is a good deal. And I think that's the only part I really care about. I'm only concerned about this sacking clause. So your creature needs to survive combat in order for it to work. I guess if your creatures are unblockable and you consistently do that, this is going to be a good card in those decks. And that brings us to the end of Murders at Karlov Manor. If you stayed this long, I hope you enjoyed. Subscribe. You clearly like something if you're still here. The reason why I didn't do a video for yesterday is I was recovering from my work schedule. I work nights on the weekends, and I slept way too long yesterday, and even today I'm feeling a little sluggish, and hopefully it didn't impact me too terribly much when doing this video. That's all I have to say about that. I'll talk to you all tomorrow. Have a great day. Bye.